Hello everyone, and welcome to the Detachment 145 Go Knowles Open Ranks Inspection Procedure video. Let's get started. As the flight commander, you will command your flight through the procedures for Open Ranks Inspection, or ORIs. For this video, I will refer to the flight as Tango Flight. To begin, follow the flight into 3 elements with the command Tango Flight in 3 elements, fall in. Next, command your flight to do a right face to get them into column formation to begin taller tapping. Taller tapping is done 3 times. First in column formation, then in inverted line formation, and then column formation one more time. In each formation, there are exceptions for who is taller tapped. For example, in column formation, the guidon bearer, element leaders, and deputy flight commander are not taller tapped as they need to remain in their position. Looking at the illustration, the guidon bearer, element leaders, and deputy flight commander are crossed out in red to indicate that they are exempt from taller tapping in column formation. To demonstrate the movement, Cadet A would be taller than Cadet B. Cadet A will tap B on the shoulder and then take a diagonal step forward and to the right while B does the opposite. These movements are to be executed simultaneously with each other. Each cadet would then assume the position that the other was previously in and continue to taller tap as necessary. When you're in column formation, to taller tap, you say the command. With the exception of the guidon bearer, element leaders, and deputy flight commander, if you are taller than the cadet in front of you, tap them on the shoulder and move forward. Now that the cadets are taller tapped in column formation, you can then turn them to inverted line formation by giving the command, right face. Now that you are in inverted line, the only cadet that is exempt from taller tapping is the deputy flight commander if there is another cadet behind them. If there is no one behind them, then there are no exceptions. The same procedure from column formation is used to switch spots with a shorter cadet in inverted line as well. Now that you're in inverted line formation, identify if there's a cadet behind the deputy flight commander. If there is, call the command. With the exception of the deputy flight commander, if you are taller than the cadet in front of you, tap them on the shoulder and move forward. If there is no one behind the deputy flight commander, then you will call. With no exceptions, if you are taller than the cadet in front of you, tap them on the shoulder and move forward. In this case, there was a cadet behind the deputy flight commander, so the command called is, with the exception of the deputy flight commander, if you are taller than the cadet in front of you, tap them on the shoulder and move forward. Once the taller tapping has been completed, the flight commander will give the command, left face, to perform taller tapping one last time in column formation. The flight commander will then give the command, with the exception of the guidon bearer, element leaders, and deputy flight commander, if you are taller than the cadet in front of you, tap them on the shoulder and move forward. As can be seen, the flight is properly sized at this point, so no more taller tapping needs to be done. To conclude the taller tapping portion, the flight commander will then give the command cover to confirm that the flight is at the correct dress, cover, interval, and distance. Next, the flight commander will conduct a count off. The flight commander will give the command count off, and on the execution command of HOF, the first rank will turn their heads 45 degrees to the right and in unison call out 1 over their right shoulder. Please note that the cadets in the column of the guidon bearer will not turn their heads. Once the number is sounded, the cadets will go back to attention. Once they are back at attention, cadets in the next rank will turn their heads 45 degrees to the right and call out the subsequent number 2. This procedure continues until all ranks have counted off. Please note that the very last rank will not turn their head, but will remain facing forward at attention when calling the number. The command count off is always given 2 times.
Out! Hop! 1, 2, 3! Out! Hop! 1, 2, 3!
The flight commander will then call a left face to put the flight back into line formation and then put them at parade rest. As can be seen, the flight commander then lines himself up with the flight, does an about face, and marches 6 paces away from the flight, and then assumes the position of parade rest. At this point, the flight is ready for inspection. The flight commander will then wait for the grader to arrive and will stay at parade rest until they do. Once the inspector is within 6 paces from the flight commander will snap to attention, look over their right shoulder, and command their flight to attention. Once the flight is at attention, the flight commander will salute the inspector and render the appropriate greeting of the day to the inspector. The inspector will then return the salute and the greeting of the day, followed by the verbiage, "Prepare your flight for inspection." Next, the flight will open ranks. To open ranks, the first element will take 2 steps forward, the second element will take 1 step forward, and the third element will remain in place. Everyone will then immediately dress. To perform the open ranks, the flight commander will about face and then command "Open ranks, march." Once the command is given, the flight commander will immediately half left face and march until they are 1 pace away from the guidon bearer's right-hand side and face the first element. The flight commander will then have each cadet in the elements align their heels with the element leaders. The flight commander will refer to their cadets. The flight commander will then have each cadet in the elements align their heels with the element leaders. The flight commander will refer to the cadets by their number in their element that they counted off with earlier and have them move forward or backwards. For example, if the cadet is too far back, command 2 forward and then steady when they are aligned.
3 back. Steady.
When adjusting the spacing, the flight commander will take small lateral steps but will not lean side to side. In addition, the cadet within the flight will take short, choppy steps as if they are recovering while following the command of the flight commander. Once the last element has been aligned, the flight commander will march until they are 1 pace to the right and 3 paces in front of the guidon bearer, perform a left face, and then command "Ready, front." At this point, the flight is prepared for inspection. The flight commander will take 1 step forward and perform a right face in order to signify to the inspector that they are ready. Once the inspector arrives, the flight commander will salute the inspector and state, "Cadet, name of the inspector, Tango Flight is prepared for inspection." The inspector will salute back and will inspect the flight commander first. At this point, the deputy flight commander is also responsible for taking 1 step backward out of the flight and march up to the flight commander and inspector. After the inspector has completed inspecting the flight commander, the inspector will state, "Accompany me on this inspection." The flight commander will then perform a left face and command, "Second and third elements, parade at rest." The flight commander will then perform a half left haze and march until they are 1 pace in front of the element leader of the first element. As the inspector marches to the front of the guidon bearer, the deputy flight commander will end up 1 pace to the left of the inspector to signify to the flight commander that the inspector has finished inspecting the cadet in front of them. The inspector will nod over their right shoulder, and both of them will perform an in-place halt to the right, otherwise known as a duck walk. This process will repeat until the last person in the element has been inspected. As the inspector is rounding the corner to inspect the back of the first element, the second element will call their element to attention by giving the command. While inspecting the back of the first element, the order will go inspector, flight commander, and then deputy flight commander. Once they are done inspecting the back of the first element, the deputy will come around and assume their original position. As a cadet within the flight, when the inspector approaches you to inspect you, you are responsible for rendering the appropriate greeting of the day. The same process from before will apply, and the third element will call their element to attention while the inspector rounds the corner. After the inspector has fully completed inspecting the element is allowed to call their element to parade rest. After the inspector has finished inspecting the third element, they will begin inspecting the deputy flight commander. The deputy flight commander will then hand off the grading sheet, as they cannot be inspected with the sheet in their hand. Now that the inspector has completed inspecting the deputy flight commander, the inspector will command "Post." If the inspector does not command post, the flight commander will be responsible for calling it. The deputy flight commander will then march back to their original position within the flight. The flight commander will then march until they are 1 pace to the right and 3 paces in front of the guidon bearer, perform a left face, and command their flight to attention. The flight commander will then take 1 step forward and perform a right face. The inspector will then provide feedback on the inspection to the flight commander while the flight commander remains at the position of attention. Once the inspector is done providing feedback, the flight commander will ask, "Will that be all?" If the inspector says that will be all, the flight commander will then render salute and give the appropriate greeting of the day, which the inspector will return and then depart the evaluation area. The flight commander will then perform a left face and command, "Close ranks, march." The second element will take 1 pace forward, and the third element will take 2 paces forward, returning to the close ranks position. The flight commander will then march until they are centered 3 paces away from their flight, and they will announce any discrepancies that were noted to the flight, and the flight will remain at attention. After this has been completed, the flight commander will give the command to fall out. This concludes the procedures for open ranks inspections. Thank you to all the cadets who helped out with the recording of this video.